Refill what you get.
And the goals. Goals list.
Wait, where am I? Hey, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for, I'll never miss another meeting.
I've never said it.
Hi, everybody.
Couple of Zoomers.
Do I need it for tonight? We don't have any, we don't.
Dawn and
No, I just go like this.
Yeah.
Well, if you're talking about the thing that gets read, what do they call it? But there's no reason to have it. Is there?
Not the red one, but the other one shows you. But you can, it's the same as this, you can love that.
Hey, John, can you guys hear us okay?
Yep.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, real good.
All right, we're a couple minutes late, 6:02. And this is calling the meeting to order for the Planning Commission of May, Gerhart Planning Commission. The consent agenda, do we have any corrections to minutes, comments on the financial report?
I sent some, what I thought were typos. I wasn't at the meeting, but I did listen. I did send those in and I noticed there's a new set of minutes.
Yep. It's been updated.
And we did get those, thanks for looking at that.
And I have a little report about that as well,
Okay,
about the minutes we read.
well, and my comment will be, I think we got some of the participants improperly referenced as far as comments. Yeah, Taggart making graph comments, I believe.
Oh, did I?
Yeah, and is that what you were gonna suggest?
Yeah, well, I was gonna talk about how this happened. So two things happened on Thursday as we were completing the minutes. Our system did something and we lost them all just before they had to go out. And she had spent hours on those minutes because it was very important.
Yeah.
So some of the typos and the references, we need to fix. We fixed some of the typos and we need to know about these reference issues as well to make sure that those minutes are accurate. But we had to put them together at the very last 11th hour to get it to work. So I think we've got our system fixed so that that won't happen again. But please let us know what does not look correct and then we will correct it as well. And go ahead and
Look at those. Probably not. Look at, because I wouldn't look at them either, except I'm gonna sit
I have
in the
not
hot seat
looked at
tonight, so I have to look at them.
Do you have a particular area where you were concerned?
Well, I think the early on comments that where Terry was questioning both this
I'm in the minutes.
Maury's, but I'm in the minutes and you should be. Where you were questioning Eisman, the planner for Maury.
Mhm.
You were suggesting, hey, have you thought about this? Right?
Yeah,
You can see them all, but I think like on page 3, there's some stuff that should be graphed, not tagged. This is my take, but you take a look and see if you agree.
I agree.
But so what's the procedure? Do we just leave them as not approved until June, or approved with corrections, or what kind of the motion should be made?
If you have your corrections, then
Well,
I can.
I don't, I kind of was looking at it in the
Okay,
last half hour.
Then I'll just bring it back to the June meeting.
I think we should table it then, but
Okay.
with the, because we need to get those straight. And so.
I'll read them.
Okay.
And if I see a problem, I'll let you know.
Okay.
Okay,
There's
Well-
3 references to Taggart on page 3. at the start of the sentence.
Right, and I think all of those are draft, my interpretation, but Terry he'll remember what his comments. So anyway, what
This
we'll
one
do
was
then,
definitely-
the minutes will be tabled until June. Any comments on the financial report? So, and there's no correspondence, so we'll move, we have a motion to approve with future amendments of the consent agenda.
So move.
Can you say, oh, you can't.
I'll second.
There we go. Okay.
Can I ask,
Moved and seconded.
what does it mean, a consent agenda?
Consent agenda is usually to take the everyday things that we always go over, lump them into one thing, one vote, and be done with it, rather than going over the initial meeting. I like the way it works in the planning commission, and maybe we can bring that into the city council in the future.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, for reports, staff.
Okay, so I'll start with this, thank you, commission, and
Sorry, Russ, I think we need a vote on that.
Oh, thank you, Don. We have moved and seconded, all those in favor,
Aye.
opposed?
I'm gonna abstain just because I wasn't at that meeting. I
Okay.
was listening, but on my phone.
All right. And Don, were you a aye? Okay, thank you.
I was an aye.
All right. So then, staff.
okay, thank you. Pardon me, I might do a few circles here. We've been up for a lot of hours working on some situations these days. But, things are going pretty well around the city, and we've had some good things happen. One of those things is that it looks like the planning commission, as has happened in the past, seems to be a farm team for city councilors here in the city of Deerheart. And while we are losing Sharon from the planning commission, we're gaining her in the city council, and it's been good. It's been fun, and I look forward to working with her now. And thank her very much for her time as a volunteer within the planning commission. Within those same realm, welcoming back Miss Lauren Cochran. Alina was on the planning commission when I started my job here almost 12 years ago. And was very patient with me and very helpful in regards to getting me up and learning more things about planning commission, zone code in the world. It was an interesting planning commission back then, in that we had a lot of people that were also involved in some of the things that occurred during the comprehensive plan. We had a lot of people that were here for a long time in giving us that tenure, and then bringing up some of the newer people that were coming along. And I think that served Deerheart very well in the past, and I'm very thankful that you're back and able to assist us through moving forward to some of the things that might be coming to Deerheart. So welcome back, Ms. Ford.
Thank you.
As far as the city goes, it's been very busy. Basically, the staff has been running full throttle, for lack of a better term, for the last month. We had multiple meetings with the city council. We've done a lot of work. We've worked on new ordinances. We've taken care of some difficult situations, but we've also had a lot of positive things that happened. And one of the ones from today that I want to talk about is the police chief recruitment process that we are just hopefully finishing up. As you know, we've been looking for police officers since Vince Yokoyama had left 2 years ago, and it's been a very difficult job to find police officers in today's politics. But we were lucky to get a couple of applications in, and some that we are considering very closely, but we're holding off on making that decision because today the city council made an offer to a police, potential candidate for police chief today. That process, we used GMP, they were consultants, and they took this small town and helped us get through a process to where the public was very much or as much as possible involved. We had about 11 applicants for that position initially, which was quite, it was stunning, as a matter of fact. When I tell other organizations that, they don't believe us, but people, do want to come to work for this little town. And in that case, what we did is we went through this process, and GMP, which has retired police chiefs, people that have been doing this for over 25 years, got together and helped weed out all these applications. They did background reports on the ones they didn't read out, and we really got down to 3 candidates. One of which dropped out for family reasons, moving all the way from Maine to here. It turns out that his family wanted him to stay, so I bet you that felt pretty good. But the 2 candidates that we were left were really good, excellent, I think, in that we then put together an interview panel and of the city council, and then a secondary interview panel of residents and staff. So Monday we did a meet and greet within the community. People came in and met the applicants. They got a chance to do a speech. Tuesday morning we met. Sharon was of course on the counselor side, but Tom was here, Melissa, Eddie. Polina was, yes, Polina, Robert from B Street, and some local folks that some of them might not agree with the city of Gerhard and some of the things that we do. So we tried to search out a good rounded amount of people. And I think we accomplished that. So we had that interview process, and then a candidate kind of became clear. So today we wrote up a letter of offer to the latest, or to the candidate that was most promising to us. And I have sent, and then the council went ahead and codified that today. They sent the staff forward with making an offer to the police chief. I had a conversation with that person today, and that was Joshua Gregory. Joshua is a sergeant detective at the city of Seaside, as a matter of fact. So we're getting some local flavor, some people, a gentleman that knows some of the cast and characters, a guy who is networked in with the area law enforcement. But not only that, this gentleman here has some specialties to where he goes out and he trains other departments. He's in charge of organizations within the police business, and he's just, I think that if he takes the offer, he's going to bring us up a notch. All of us. He's a very eager gentleman. He's smart, and I hope he signs the agreement. So I'll let you'll probably find out here within the next couple of days as that
I was just gonna
goes.
say, what's the time frame? How
Yeah.
much time did you give them?
Well, I'm hoping tomorrow. But if he does accept us, we've got a couple more things that need to happen. We're gonna have a more thorough background check done, which I'm sure he'll do fine with. There's personality work and tests and some time to determine whether or not this person is capable, but he's been doing this job for a long time, and he's very good at it. So once we get through that, then we would like to start. I would hope that maybe by July 1 at the latest, we can get that rolling in, because he's very busy in doing his job in Seaside as he is now, and we'll probably want to finish up some of those things. So currently, we have Ian Brown in our office. He's stepped up and he's been doing a great job. And we also currently have an agreement with the Clatsop County Sheriff's Department to cover for us while we are short of officers, and they've been doing a good job. I think that people have noticed their presence and they've been assisting us in calls and especially Ian. So the relationship is good and we've kind of started something there too, but I wanted to thank the Clatsop County Sheriff's Office and especially Sheriff Phillips for making that available to us. So I think that's exciting news. Gearhart's starting to get back on top of things in regards to our recruitment and the people that work for us. We have a fantastic team. I think he's going to be an excellent person to come in, and so I'm very excited. It's been a while. We're kind of worried about this for a while, and I think so is the community. And I see a lot of good things about to happen. Does anybody have any questions about that process?
Are the officers that you're trying to hire, is that like on hold until you work through the chief piece?
It is now. Before, we were really pushing to try to find the officers because we didn't want to go through that recruitment policy and then lose them for waiting for the new chief. But because of some things that we're working on with those officers, they've decided to hold on. And they also would appreciate getting a chance to meet the new chief before they took the job as well. So we have 2 candidates and hopefully we'll be able to make that call sooner than July 3rd before he really starts, if he gets to the end. So, yes. So that'll leave us with a chief, a sergeant, and an officer. Now I know the city and the councilors are interested in having a 4th officer in town, but at this time of the budget, we'll have to start talking about how, if there's additional sources of revenue or how we could shift things around in Gearhart. But the Gearhart budget is very tight. We run off of everything, including water, about $8 million with 1,500, almost 1,500 people, or excuse me, 1,800 people. Whereas the city of Cannon Beach has the same amount of residents, about the same amount of water connections. They have actually less fire calls, but they're running on a $40 million budget. And so just kind of because of all the taxes and things. So I think we're a pretty scrappy crew, and I'm pretty proud of being able to, the group being able to get these people in here. So yeah, I'm excited. Yeah. The next thing is, and this is a little bit of, planning commission land use, I suppose, but we did pass last week the homeless camping ordinance here in the city of Gearhart. That was passed last week. It was declared an emergency, so it's ready to go. It is ordinance, it is law now in the city of Gearhart, and we've been ramping up to begin that process. I think what we're waiting on is some translation documents, but because, in the ordinance, we need to do Spanish and English translation for this. We'll receive those here within a day. And then Monday, we're going to begin 72-hour notice process, where people will have 72 hours to move or be trespassed. And then we'll just work through those situations. I want to let the commission know that we've been doing a lot of work with these groups up until this point. This is not a surprise to the folks that are down there. We've kept them along in this process. We've tried everything we can to help them with what they might need. But at this point, with this new ordinance, we're going to be able to remove that encampment over some time. There might be a few hiccups, but early next week that will begin. The process is that once we give them the notice, and if we have to trespass, they will move. Once they move away, we'll be removing all those rocks and stones and try to get back to normal. But in that ordinance that we wrote, there was 3 things that were important that we had to have legally, and this is due to 9th Circuit Court of Appeal and Oregon law. We had to have time, place, and manner restrictions. What they're requiring of us is that we have to allow and manage camping in Gearhart. And homelessness is not a crime. So cities figure it out. Seaside has areas to where they allow people to go and camp. They have an encampment, but Gearhart does not have that kind of situation. We don't have that property. So with time, place, and manner, just to shorten this up a little bit, essentially, People will be able to, and as they need to, they will be able to camp in a tent or a camper in Gearhart from the hours of 9 PM to 9 AM. They, during that time, they should not, and the ordinance states that they shall not extend things outside their camper or tent, as far as, you know, their belongings. They're not allowed warming fires or generators to be run because we're not set up on that. We don't have a separate piece of property, so we know that that would be a nuisance for the people of Gearhart and its residents and visitors. You know, the other thing that they're gonna be required to do, that they're gonna have to show us that they have had recently their RV or their camper trailer pumped for septic systems within a reasonable period of time. I think it was 96 hours. And show us that they have done that. And that's a health and safety issue with the city. We want to make sure that things are clean and sanitary. So this is something that they'll have to accomplish, and they can do that with septic companies will come and do that. There are places in Warrenton where they, or a place in Warrenton where they can go ahead and dump their tanks. But that was something that was important to us.
How do you enforce this?
So the enforcement is through the police department. This is a city municipal ordinance. The camping hours are pretty well set up. It's the place is the third thing on there I wanted to tell you about. We had to find locations in Gearhart where these people can camp. And because we don't have much room here and we're mostly residential, we chose the commercial districts that are able to have these campers overnight. Glen Avenue is one of those areas still where they currently are. And actually, so is the areas right across the street from us here in Gearhart. We didn't have any other place to do this. We had to have a place. What we did do is we restricted any of this camping from happening in a residential zone. So that is not allowed, or near a park.
When you say right across from the street,
It could be right across from City Hall, up a little bit near the park, you know, up actually in the C1 zone Pacific Way.
So
so they can move up there at night.
What? Yes, so they can go up, they would camp from 9 PM to 9 AM, and then they would have to vacate and move on, and then come back.
And if they don't, what do you do?
Then we would trespass them and begin that process, and that's fairly quick.
You arrest them?
What was that?
You arrest them?
I hope it doesn't come to that, and most of them do not want to get to even a trespassing because they don't want this on their record for multiple reasons. Potentially having other issues that they're dealing with as well. But yeah, we'll go through that. We'll kind of have to see how it goes, but we're gonna hold them, we're gonna hold things accountable for the community. This will give us the tools we need to do a lot better job than what's been going on down there at Glen Avenue.
So you can pitch a tent in a parking place on the road
Mhm,
on Pacific Way.
mhm. They could, or a right of way grass area between the roadway and the actual boundaries. But there's not a lot of spaces for that. We don't have a lot of that, so it's mostly gonna be on the roadways. It's gonna be difficult to find some places, but we do have them available. And that was what we had to accomplish. But yeah, there'll be the requirements of them not spreading out, having their tanks pumped, having to move on every day.
And not on the ridge path.
Not on the ridge path, not in a park, not in a residential zone, not within 50 feet of a residential zone.
And so are these, like if someone parks in front of, you know, the Pacific Way Bakery, and then they have to leave, are they gonna expect that this is my spot, I'm coming back tonight in my camper? I mean, the way they run the Glen Avenue deal, it seems like there's sort of a underground network of, I own this spot, you own that spot.
With moving them around, we're not taking reservations. So, yeah, we're not taking reservations, you know, we're gonna accommodate these folks as best we can and within the law. And then see how this goes. There's not a lot of case law on this. A lot of cities are afraid to do the prosecution, so we're in uncharted territory. And not only that, but the Oregon law and even a little bit of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeal is not clear. But we've done our best. We've hired the best attorney we could find to be able to handle this, who has the experience in it. He's wrote the ordinance for Astoria, Seaside, all over Oregon. He used to be League of Oregon Cities General Counsel. So he's got a background in planning and land use, and he did a great job, Mr. Jacobs.
When do you expect to be ready to go? I mean, obviously the ordinance has to be official.
Another part of the ordinance, it is official because we declared an emergency. So the city council can declare an emergency and vote twice by title only as long as it's completely unanimous. A normal ordinance takes, you know, you vote on it 30 days later, you vote on it 30 days later, it becomes an ordinance. Well, declaring an emergency, it's immediately in place. So we're just working on finishing up the Spanish translations for what we need to do. And Monday, we anticipate we'll be posting 72-hour notices. But our job also with that is to also notify and bring in services. So class of community or class of behavioral health, you know, will help us out. Helping Hands will offer some things. We've been working with these people the entire time, trying to get them what it is that they need through these groups, but they will be there and present during the time where they have to be. And throughout 72 hours to see what kind of help that they can give. There's some challenges out there these people will have to get over to be able to even move. But just this week, we replaced 3 tires on one of the RVs. We're ready with some gas if that's what's necessary. And hopefully some of these services can come in and give them a hand as well. So we're as compassionate as we can be. Yeah, it's time for the health and safety of Gearhart to move forward. And Monday is the time when we intend to post. Then that will give us Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 72 hours. And then Thursday, we'll start moving forward if we need to with our other plan. We'll have the sheriff's department there to assist us, and Ian, of course.
So what about, so everybody, puts their tent away at 8 o'clock in the morning. Do they just go stand on the street corner and wait till 9 at night?
They could.
I mean, it seems like there might, depending on how many people are truly stay after that there's a general cleanup at Glen. But I'm just thinking about the daylight hours when you don't want to go 20 miles away to come back here.
Well, if somebody in an RV came and parked somewhere in town for a couple of hours or for the day, there's no law against that. And these people are no different. So if they decided to camp and they wanted to go ahead and hang out somewhere in a parking spot for a day, they're welcome to do that. And that's part of what we're dealing with in this with these laws. You know, our hands are kind of tied with this because they are kind of protected in a way. Homelessness is not a crime, so we have to accept it. We have to deal with it, and we have to be, like I said, as compassionate as possible, but yet still have results. And I think that this ordinance is good, and I think it gives us the toolbox that we need.
Okay.
And
But you can't pitch tent during the day.
no camping.
And you can, so said people when they leave at 9 in the morning could go to the residential neighborhoods and park on the public.
I suppose they could. And there's not a lot you can do about that. We researched that, and there's just no way to, Gearhart could have an ordinance that similar to Cannon Beach, I think, and I don't know it exclusively, but where RVs cannot park downtown, they can't be good, but because Cannon Beach provided them with an RV parking area. And so back on 2nd Street in Cannon Beach is large parking spots to where people come back in for the day, but they can't camp overnight. So
Sorry.
yeah, so that's kind of where we're at.
Chad, was there any consideration given by the city council? I apologize if I did not attend an appropriate meeting there as a visitor, to actually find land that we could designate as a spot. I mean, I don't know if urban growth boundary land towards the north could be considered, or was that ever considered?
Yes. First, I started working with the city of Seaside, and the manager and I were just kicking around, what if we got together and put a camp in? We helped found a place, and then we can share that. But that doesn't work because it has to be within our municipality. And that's the big thing, is it has to be within the municipality of Gearhart. It cannot be outside of the municipality. The only land that Gearhart owns, other than where the fire station and the city hall are, is up in the woods. We have about 60 acres in the Thompson Falls area. But that is, it's not set up for that sort of thing. We would have to prepare it, but yet it's outside the city of Gearhart, so it's not legal. So yes, we are land poor here in Gearhart, so we did not have any camping areas, and then we even considered potentially looking at property to buy. There's just nothing the size that we need to purchase within Gearhart. And even if we did find a place to purchase in Gearhart that was okay, potentially out of the downtown area, and that, I'm sure the neighbors of that particular encampment would also be very concerned. So we felt compelled to make the residential zone in its entirety a place that we wouldn't do this. And so that left us with a very small area. The commercial zone does include off of Highway 101, but it can't be on private property. So they might be able to find some right of way. People might be able to find some right of way to camp on Highway 101 because that area is available, but I really don't know how they would do that.
Good luck.
Thank you.
It's a going process. We're growing through it, and we're learning a lot. We're learning a lot.
Is there anything for the planning commission to be thinking about or doing in any way with regard to that whole subject?
Well, I mean, I think that we should go through this a little bit and see how it goes, but you know, the parking ordinance lies within the municipal code, not the zoning code. An RV parking ordinance would be the same. It would be land use for the planning commission, and I can't figure out where that is now, but you know, again, we're in the learning process. We're gonna see how this goes, and there may be opportunities. But I think, you know, the planning commission is out and about, and people do come to you with issues, and I think getting communication from what's going on around the neighborhoods and what people are seeing and bringing it to staff would be helpful. So Monday, we'll begin that process.
Moving on.
Yeah.
That's all. I have.
Okay, that's it for staff, huh? Okay, we have tonight, Ginny has requested an excused absence.
So move.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Ginny is excused for one meeting. That was the vote, right? Okay, visitor comments not related to the agenda. None, and there's no public hearings. We have unfinished business that was actually on the agenda last month when we went way over with the school rezone question. And well, unfinished business, I guess the first aspect is within our packet. We just got this letter from Mr. Moore's lawyer that says they're withdrawing. And so that's just a rubber stamp situation, as far as I understand it. So that's been set in. So that's unfinished business. The new business has to do with the tree planting ordinance, tree planting, tree permitting process. And that's a discussion for tonight.
Here's my question. How did this end? I've been on the planning commission like 6 or 7 years. how did this land on the agenda and what are we being asked to do? And is this a public hearing where we just discuss something? Is the public involved? What is the process here? Are there been complaints or are there issues with this? Or why are we being asked to deal with something? I read both of these things that you sent, one for here and one for Canada Beach. What am I supposed to do with that? And who's involved in this discussion?
Well, I
Mr.
think
Chairman.
my recollection is it was on the tail end of the agenda from last month, and it was presented by previous commissioner, now council, sitting in the room here. And that was, I believe I'm correct, that you brought it to the planning commission as something you wanted to discuss. Is that correct? And maybe that's not a correct way to handle this, but that was my understanding is the way it came to us.
So is this a public hearing where you hear from the audience? And if so,
Well, I
it
don't
should have
believe it
been
is. It
announced.
hasn't been presented as such, so it's not.
Okay, so it's just our discussion.
It's our discussion.
Okay.
But that's the history, if I have the history correct.
Yes, but I'd like to add to that history and then give you some of the issues that are going on and start with tree planting so that you understand what's happening. And then we can figure out what it is that your part would be. And I'll try not to take too much time to do this, but I want to give you some history. So if this would be a good time, sir? Go ahead and start. Yes. So the history of trees in Gearhart has been that it's been the Gearhart city staff. This was told to me by previous city administrators that the city of Gearhart does not own any trees in Gearhart. We have trees all over the right-of-ways in Gearhart. They've grown there. They've been there, for many, many years. When a tree issue and safety or pruning or things like that, we don't do any pruning on any of our trees in Gearhart. We don't maintain the trees that are in the right of way. We did not plant the trees, nor are we planting any new trees in Gearhart at this time. We do not have a plan for how trees should be planted if we were to plant trees, or even where that would be. We don't know what the community really wants, but we have some indications. So in the past, when people would come to me and they say, I want to remove this tree out in front of this house, won't the city take it? It's your tree. We tell them, well, it's not our tree. It's not dangerous. We're not taking it down. But depending on the scenario and where they're at and how it's impeding the house, or whether or not it's creating damage to the roof or the sidewalks or their driveways, we may assist them in these tree removals. But we don't have a permitting process to do that. So we do cut down a lot of dangerous trees in town, or trees that we do some limbing of dangerous things that have widow makers and things like that. But we don't have a plan for any replacement of trees. So what's happening now is that with the increase of people that are living in town and the people that are coming from other places and expecting services and things within Gearhart, there has been conversation from people, and this has been happening over the last 4 or 5 years, of we need to plant more trees in Gearhart by various people. It's not a whole lot. But we don't have a plan, so we tell them that we're not going to do that. Currently, we have some cherry trees that have been planted up and down. Some of those happened accidentally, they just appeared. That's a whole other story. And it was with the thought homeowners association members and a member within that homeowners association. It wasn't a homeowners association deal. They wanted downtown Gearhart to look a little bit differently, to have these beautiful cherry trees blooming throughout the cherry tree blooming season. So they began putting some trees, but since then I have put a stop to all of that. The reason I put a stop to all of that is because we do not have a plan. The city does not know how to take care of trees because we do not have a plan. And a lot of this was done with volunteer effort, to where people provided the trees, wanted to plant them, and then they would water them daily for us because we don't have a plan for the infrastructure, nor do we have the infrastructure in the ground to take care of this. So by putting a stop to this, it brought in some people that say, well, how do we continue? This is a city council issue when we get to the end of it. This is a a situation where this is a roads and street policy. And then the city council directs that policy. So if we were to plant trees, we would want to know where they would be, what type of trees, whether or not they'd be damaging trees or not damaging trees. Are they going to push the sidewalk? Are they going to do things to the roadway? Are they going to grow over and things like that? So those are none of the reasons that we stopped the tree planting that people wanted to do by volunteerism. So we're still getting pressure from people wanting to plant these trees and wanting to change the look of Gearhart a little bit and increase it. But we've just been pushing people off, but that pressure keeps coming. So I talked to the city council about this. We don't have a plan or a place to put these things. So, but we know that there needs to be a public process. We don't even know that this is really something that the greater part of Gearhart wants to have happen. So the city council asked that we talk to the planning commission and see if they would consider working with us and staff to begin crafting a policy, if that's the direction that we want to go, and then get it out into the public and have some discussions about that future. If it is in fact that the city wants and the people want to start planting trees, we want to have a plan to do that. And we will do that. If it turns out that they do not, then we won't. But this needs to be a community decision. It can't be the city administrator, and the city council is not ready to make that, and they want to have a public process. And then they were hoping that the planning commission, similar to what they did, what you folks did with the Parks Master Plan, which was in your purview, to get into something hopefully much more simple than a Parks Master Plan and start talking about what this would take and deciding within this group whether or not they think they would make a recommendation to the city council to move forward with a policy.
But you've said several times, we don't have a plan, we don't have a plan, and you told us why we need a plan. So why wouldn't we say, come up with a plan, but whose job is that? Is that a staff job, or whose job is it to come up with a plan that you can bring back to us to consider, have a public hearing, and then move it on to the city council?
We would like some help with that. We would like some help in crafting that. We would like some help with some people to do some investigation with what other cities have done, such as Portland. They have a very comprehensive plan about planting, doing some research, talking to people about the community. And then we schedule this to where the city will bring some policy that has been done through other cities, and then have the discussion if you even want to move forward with something like that. And if we did, then we would take it to the council and they would be able to codify the policy.
Do you feel that this needs to move forward as our exec?
I know that right now our time is very limited within the staff and what we can do. I do know that there's a lot of pressure with some of the people that have been moving into town lately, and even some that have lived here for some time that want to see Gearhart, I guess, pretty up a little bit.
Huh.
We are not sure that that's the direction that everybody in Gearhart wants to go. So you see where we're kind of in a position where we need some public feedback, and I'm not sure how to get it.
Well, the staff should be involved in this.
Oh, yeah, it is that we will, but we'll need some.
So what's your preference, to put it off to a later date, or to give you authority now to move forward?
No, I'm not looking for that. I'm not prepared to ask for that. I don't have a plan to even propose to you at the moment.
Well,
At what point did I interject into?
So,
Yeah.
so what are you looking for from us tonight?
I guess a conversation and ideas about how you feel about this and whether or not, you know, we should be involved.
Well, what is a survey, I mean, our surveys are sort of the worst thing, the worst thing in the world, other than they might help out. But if we're having people plant, flowering trees, and to me, 30 some years in the town, it's always been a evergreen town. And so do we have a survey that says, hey, we have 1,000 responses and so many wanted evergreens and so many wanted flowering, and then that could lead to discussion as to whether we're going to allow, what kind of trees are going to be allowed. If it's going to be a community input thing.
If
I'm
I,
not sure, creating a survey is another thing that someone has to do.
Well, that's kind of a goofy survey. You want to have a plan that they don't even know anything about.
Well, it sounds like you're getting pressure though from people to plant flowering trees in the last year or two that has never happened.
I guess to me that you need a plan, but you're almost telling me it's not the time to do it because you don't have the time and the staff and availability.
Well, I think he's asking us to do it perhaps.
Right,
Can
well,
I-
it's to get
can I
the
ask
ball
a question?
rolling. Somebody wants to talk up there.
Yeah.
Yeah, John.
It's me, guys. When I first joined the planning commission, a little bit less than 12 months ago, the parks work was very heavily underway, mostly complete at that point in time. And I was very impressed at the work that was done by that group. I don't know exactly which commissioners were working on that. It was, I thought, an excellent piece of work. And as Chad mentioned a moment ago, this seems to be a kind of small version of that. So I think we have a template for how we as a planning commission or could spawn a group to do some work, preliminary work before we send it out to the public. And then, of course, we would have to debate whether or not it was appropriate to send it out to the public for input. I don't know if this is appropriate at this point to mention, but I would personally love to be involved in something like that and do at least the first tranche of work to see what other cities have done in this regard, do some investigation, bring back a report to the planning commission for discussion, and then, we can see where we go from there.
I just, I've talked many times with Sharon about trees in town. While I was mayor, I was involved several times in people complaining about a tree that they felt was dangerous. And there was what I thought was a lack of process for determining whether or not a tree that's on the right of way, I mean, the manager for Public Works went out and looked at it with me. A particular tree I have in mind, it's on 5th Street that was complained about. And he says, yeah, it's top heavy. And probably within a day or two, that tree was gone because I didn't have, even as mayor, I didn't really have anything to say. No, I think that tree should stay. And maybe it just needs to be limbed, or maybe it needs to be lightened in some way. And so it's just cut off. I mean, it's probably a 20, 30, 40-year-old spruce tree. And so that for me, flowering cherries just seem like something that's got to be swept up and taken care of. I mean, I have one in my yard, but I am more concerned about keeping the trees we have, and I found the Cannon Beach ordinance and looked at it because it has a lot more in the tree ordinance. I mean, we have a tree ordinance, it's very short and succinct. And there's not very much process around keeping trees in our tree ordinance. So from my perspective, it's more how much tree preservation. Is there anything we can tighten up in our existing ordinance to make it better? A little harder to cut a tree down.
Yeah. Well, so if you've been there, done that, John's interested. Is 2 people enough to come up with an initial, foray into this, or would you prefer to have more than 2? I'm just throwing that out there. If 2 of our commissioners are willing.
I have a question. It's really for a question of Sharon, because I think you've already done a little bit. You're the one who's got the so do you have anything to say here that gets us rolling?
Well, and again, we're on the tree planting side. The next part is the tree permitting side. And I wanted to give on the tree planting side, I've been working with, in this case, resident Sharon, as she's representing herself here today, not as the city councilor. And her and I have been having many discussions about this, trying to ferret this out. And this has been difficult for us to figure out how to get the community wrapped around this
Right.
idea. So if you folks don't mind, if Sharon could say a few words about what she's thinking, I might give you a better idea.
So the way this started, the renegade tree planters already put cherry trees in, and he was getting ready to put more cherry trees in along the front of the school, the old school. And I thought, well, boy, it would be great to carry that theme through the rest of Gerhard on the main arteries and put some along Fifth, because there's an area there that could use some foliage, and put some in certain areas along Gerhard Lane. So I came to this, I wrote a proposal. There's a plan, there's a proposal on all this. So I'm a little confused about where this conversation has gone. I wrote a proposal, was not detailed. I didn't understand all the nuances and all the things that it would have to be worked out, certainly. I wrote a proposal that I would buy the trees. Jeff Miller would supply the labor to plant the trees. I would water the trees for 2 growing seasons myself, however that looked, but that we would need the city to install taps, spigots where the trees were, and I would just drag a hose around. It's not that difficult. That was the plan, basically. So we had the labor. Jeff was gonna get the trees at $25 a tree, which is like a screaming deal. Okay, you can't buy trees for $25 anywhere. And so he was gonna get that deal. I was gonna pay for the trees. He was gonna supply the labor to plant. The city would have to supply the dirt, maybe dig the holes, maybe not. Jeff said his guy would dig the holes and supply the taps, the water taps. So then we went into, okay, well, what's that gonna cost the city? And, you know, can the city even do this? So Chad talked to Mark, right? And they think that each water tap, I think we'll need 4 taps, maybe. Each tap would cost about $3,000, but then Chad did not feel comfortable with me being the volunteer to do all the watering. He would rather have it on an irrigation system. So irrigation system adds in obviously more expense. That takes it up to about $3,000 to $5,000 per watering area. So that's the plan. I did talk to Pam Fleming with the city of Seaside, who takes care of all their trees and their flowers in the public right of way. She doesn't particularly like cherry trees because she said they can rip up a sidewalk. All the places that we're proposing to plant the trees have no sidewalks. So I don't really think that would be an issue for us. She said they are planting ginkgo trees. I talked to Jeff Miller today. I said, Jeff, can you get any other trees at the $25 per tree price? He said no. He said the ginkgos would probably be 100 or more per tree. So, you know, that ends up, I've got places, he's got places for about 20 trees. I've got places for about 40 trees. So for me, the cost of 40 times 100, you know, it's a substantial investment for me. I'm not saying I wouldn't do it, but it kind of changes the goalpost. And he does not like, as far as a street tree, you see, when you say, well, let's put this out to the public needs to understand what can be street trees, what can't be street trees. I mean, there's a very big difference between conifers that you might put in a park versus something that you might plant along a street. There's a huge difference between those two. And he said the ginkgos, he doesn't like growth habit of the ginkgos forest street trees is something about their angular, or I'm not quite sure what he said, because I looked at them afterwards. They do get very tall. The regular sized ginkgos can be almost 50 to 60 feet. So again, I'm not sure that that would be appropriate for street trees, but I'm happy to have a conversation about that. So we do have the bones of a plan when you asked, Terry. It's not like we haven't had a lot of discussions about this. I met with Rita and Dana when I was still on the planning commission. And they, along with Chad, felt that it would be best to have a public hearing for the planning commission to come up with recommendations for city council, is the way it was put to me. So here we are, there's the plan. I'm happy to answer any other questions you might have about the bones of the plan. But that's what I got for you.
Really, it comes down to, I don't have the authorization to just plant trees.
Right. Well, I think to me, the baseline is that we have to decide whether the community wants to have trees. I mean, that's the first step. And then, you know, along these different, it would beautify things, but maybe everybody says, hey, I'd love to drive into the town the way it's been. And that's going to be a faction of the community. The other comment just offhand is that some of these places along the roadway, over the years, we've approved such and such a development with money put aside for the sidewalk, bike path, etc., that's going to be put along Gearhart Road or wherever. And if it's got trees in it that have to get torn out because someday we do the walkway, then that's, you know, we're taking one forward, two back. But anyway, that doesn't preclude what you've done and what you're describing. So I still think that we need to have probably something from this committee or from this commission. And I don't know whether we want to do it with interested participants or the whole team, or, you know, where the first step should be. I'm just a little, you're not sure where to go next, but you want it to come from us in some fashion.
The neat thing about Gearhart and the difficult thing about Gearhart is we don't have all of these commissions and parties and these groups of people that really volunteer so much around. I mean, we do, we have the same, a group of people that come into town, such as the planning commission and things. There have been times where the planning commission has been used as a citizen committee as well, to start going over some of these things within Gearhart to kind of provide direction. That's really what we need. And I think that if we had a couple people within the commission that was interested in this and wanted to work with staff, and we can begin developing something that would work, then we can bring those plans and those ideas out and get people to comment on it, whether it be a survey or a meeting or a hearing. I think that would be a good approach.
Can I just say one other thing?
Mm-hmm.
This is, for me, this is not, I did not make this proposal to beautify Gearhart. That was not uppermost in my mind. I have, since I moved here almost 8 years ago, I have witnessed, personally witnessed at least 200 trees that have been cut down in this city. So we've lost relatively a lot of trees. To me, I mean, we still have a lot, but and every tree that you cut down has a carbon footprint. And we're in dire straits right now. And you may or may not believe that, and you may not think it's important, or you might think it's important. I don't know, I can't address that. But that's what's uppermost in my mind, and why I am so concerned about the trees, is because of the climate impact. Thank you.
Well, okay, so John has shown some interest in working on that. I'm not wanting to put the ball in your court. You put in a full hour on your second time.
I do not feel strongly about tree planting on rights of way. I've worked with Sharon and I've listened a lot and I've heard her concerns, but I think she knows that I've been more, I mean, I've said many times, people say, oh, doesn't the water treatment plant look really good? And I kind of go, I think it's a little overdone myself. That's just my personal feeling.
Okay.
But I had many people say, let's beautify Gerhardt. I don't particularly share that. I'm more like, I just like the way it looks when I drive in. You know, that said, I probably cut back a Scotch broom if it's hanging over the stop sign or something like that, but I'm more interested in tree preservation or making a little harder to cut a tree down.
Yeah, I don't disagree. Well, to me, whatever, if it's the 2 people or 4 people or however many, I think that's could be part of it. I mean, I think that's what we want to have. Somebody say, yeah, we save more trees, make it more, more comprehensive permitting process to take the trees down, or understand that people aren't going there in the middle of the night, cutting them down, all that. So I'm not suggesting we create a model that fits Sharon's, where her perspective is. I think we create a model that, to start a model of some kind, that's the basis of community input.
Yeah, I think I would agree. I think the core of this, going back to why I like the way the park work was done, is community input was solicited early on and throughout the process, as far as I could tell. Again, I wasn't directly part of it. And I don't mean to say that I have a particular perspective right now, whether we should have more trees, cherry trees, ginkgo trees, no trees, fewer trees. I'm just saying that I would be personally interested in being involved, leading, whatever, some work to do some research, talk to Sharon, talk to others, to get some perspectives, document some things about what we learn, bring it back to the Planning Commission to address possible next steps.
Okay.
Go for it.
Well, okay, I'll work, why don't John and John, I'll work with you, and we'll do an initial, we'll bring something to the commission in a couple of months, and then maybe we should just bring it, let everybody talk about it here, or I'm throwing this out to you, Chad, and see if this is a reasonable approach. But if we come up with something, if this body talks about it before we have it, or once it's here, it's open to the public. I'm not sure procedurally what has to happen.
Discussions and conversations are there's really not a lot of procedure to that. It's just part of the sausage making, if you will. And to answer your question, no, we're not getting into it here about this. We don't have anything in front of us to deal with. But if we could get some help with the citizens of Deerheart, and that be a few commissioners, that would be very helpful, because otherwise it's a plan that we're kind of coming up through staff. And I think with Sharon and a couple of other people working together on this, staff would be happy to assist, provide information, documents, do some research as well, and work as a team. That's kind of what I'm looking for, because you can see, even in this small room, there's a diverse amount of ideas of what we should maybe do. And that's the challenge I've been under. I haven't been able to get around that because mostly time and really, people hopping on it. But Sharon is at least helping staff and working with us and trying to push this forward, because it's a question that needs to be answered.
Right. So if we do that, I think the permitting process becomes part of what we come up with. I mean, we have on the Cannon Beach paperwork, there's a permit, there's some permitting forms.
Well, to segue into the permitting side of things, that is in the Planning Commission's bailiwick, because that is land use code. And that's something that you would be able to sink your teeth into a little easier with policies and procedures for handling such a thing. But we still need to talk about where it is that the direction that you want to give staff, maybe with some help again, to start heading in the direction. Does the Planning Commission want to start talking about the permitting? As Sharon said, that we've lost a lot of trees. staff gets a lot of pressure, why are they able to cut down their trees? And just to, if this is a good, well, I don't want to get right into that conversation until we finish this one.
Well, okay, but you're suggesting if we're concluding that John and I have the ball to run with, that we still talk about permitting tonight, or we come up with some permitting with our discussion of our general tree, we come up with a tree conclusion.
I'd like to give you some background on the permitting issue so that you understand what the issue is.
Yeah, we have nothing before us now to look at and say we like or not like. I mean, it's,
All right, well, John, if everybody, we're all happy.
And Angelina made a good point. The tree permitting process is on the goals list as well. This is part of what it is that was put onto the goals by the planning commission.
Oh, okay.
So that one is on the process, but I would go into what some of the issues are, and I think I can keep that quite short.
Okay.
And sweet.
Well,
When you're ready.
so John, we'll reach out with each other, and so the permitting process is on new business rather than our jobs list, whatever we're gonna call that. So let's talk about the permitting process right now.
Okay, I'll do my best to paraphrase what's going on and stop me if I'm wrong, but so currently our current ordinance is that a person that owns property in Gerhart, or he lives at a piece of property, really, can cut down up to 5 trees per year on their property without a permit. A tree in the city of Gerhart is defined as at 4.5 feet, that's called mean breast height. At 4.5 feet tall on the trunk, if the tree is 12 inches or greater, it is a tree. If the tree is less than 12 inches, it's not a tree. So essentially, people can cut down on their property as many small trees as they like, and they can only cut down 5 large trees per year. And there is no permitting process, they can do that without. So what's occurring is that people being very concerned about tree removal and why we're allowing this are curious and concerned that without a permitting process, how do we even know what's going on? When we hear or somebody hears a chainsaw in town, immediately we start getting some phone calls about what's going on. We don't know what's going on because the process is as it is. And so we go and we follow up. There have been some times where people are cutting down trees kind of legally, or starting to go through and cut down more trees than they're supposed to. And we are sometimes, most of the time, able to stop that. Sometimes we're not. So the pressure has been on staff that, why are we allowing this to happen? Why don't we have a tree permitting process? And that has come from Sharon primarily, but it's been a few people around town as well. So the planning commission decided to put this conversation or this topic on its goals list to tackle. And so it would be up to the planning commission to start a process to where either we get more restrictive with a permitting process. So at least, people say, so at least we know what's going on. And some people would like to get more restrictive and not allow this tree cutting to happen, not allow people to do this the way that they have in the past, and to maybe be more restrictive. There's also been conversations about a heritage tree program where we designate certain trees within the city of Gerhart to never be cut or cannot be cut unless they're dead or dangerous. So all of those things have been coming up, and Ms. Sharon was integral in putting that on the planning commission's goals list, and so that's the conversation that we enter into. I guess what staff wants to know is whether or not the planning commission would like to begin working on the project.
you said there's been pressure from Sharon and a few other people. Tell me about this other pressure that you're getting.
Neighbors concerned about that tree that they've always loved coming down, not understanding why the person's taking it down. Generally, there's things that can be explained, whether it be damage or things like that. And there has been a few people that, a handful that are very upset that the trees are being cut down at all. But it hasn't been a pitchfork moment for, you know, the staff. We don't have a lot of people coming and asking these questions, but those that are concerned are very concerned. Did that answer your question at all?
Well, of course it does, but it seems like this is gonna be a sensitive issue in Gerhardt, and you're gonna have a lot of people pressure the other way. It's my property, I can cut a tree if I want to. And so if you're gonna go down this rabbit hole, I think that you need a lot of public input.
I will say that there is also input, a handful of people that want us to do nothing, and they would prefer to be able to develop and use their property as they would like. And they're very concerned that we would be going through a tree permitting process. And I do have a few people around town
Sure.
that have mentioned that as well, that they want to be able to do these
It
things.
seems like
It's a-
east of the highway are the people who are gonna have bigger pieces of property who are gonna wanna cut trees when they wanna cut trees as opposed to ones west of the highway.
It's actually the opposite.
Oh, really?
It is.
It's you.
In the rural agricultural area of the larger pieces of property, there's not as much density, so it doesn't become as much of an issue. Over here, we've had a lot of development. And so the building envelope within the city of Gerhardt, we allow people to cut down all the trees that are in there so they can put a house. Some people don't agree with that.
But I remember a number of issues have come before us in this last year of properties east of the highway where they're taking big pieces and they're dividing them into small pieces, and trees were involved.
I
So
think,
that's gonna become more of an issue over there than it is now.
I think this will bring in a lot of energy.
A lot of interest. I like that.
Well, I think that, so you're suggesting staff is going to come up with, is it taking the current policy we have and tightening it up, or tightening it up and creating a form that be filled out? Is that what you guys want to do?
Staff is not advocating for this at the moment. We do think that a permitting process could be helpful just in communication. So that when we are called, we can say, yes, the
This is
Joneses
the
are doing what
process.
they're supposed to be doing and they're allowed to cut those trees. If we added a small permitting process to what we currently have, that would alleviate, but that would be leaving the ordinance as it is, allowing people to cut down 5 trees. They just gotta call us. We'll go ahead and measure the trees, mark them, and then we're good to go. That will add staff time. We'll have to discuss that. But that would be good for communication. We are not advocating at this point because we don't have a position here on whether or not we don't want to restrict trees or we don't want to allow them all to be cut down. We just need direction on whether or not the planning commission would like to get into the process of the permitting. And then in those conversations, the planning commission can decide on whether or not they want to be as permissive as we are, more permissive or less permissive.
But did I hear you say that you would like to have a tree permit process?
You know, Angelina, you want to talk about your experience because she's on the front lines. I used to be, but I found Angelina, so now she is. And I dearly love her for that. But you want to talk about some of your experiences and why you think that maybe a permit would be good.
I think that a permitting process would be good, not just for notification reasons. And I'm not saying that you need to go strict as Cannon Beach, but I think the city should know what's going on around, because I receive, and I'm not kidding you, 10 to 20 calls when somebody starts cutting down a tree.
No.
I mean,
Then I guess I was.
people are very concerned. I had somebody in my office yesterday, because somebody was cutting tree limbs. That is on a tree that's in her property, and I understand we can't do anything about that, that's a state thing. It's allowed, but there should be a process to bring in some sort of plan to show, you know, what trees you have on your property, what trees you're cutting, and then how many you guys want to allow. I mean, if you want to keep it at 5, keep it at 5, but it's hard to keep track, and it's hard for me to go through the process of a complaint when I don't have anything to fall back on.
Yeah, where's your paper trail?
Yeah, I have nothing.
You want a process,
Yeah.
you want some boundaries
Yeah.
set up. That makes perfect sense.
Well, so is the first step us redefining this paperwork that we currently have? I think 5 is way too many to be just allowed to cut 5 trees a year. Without any permit, as long as they're under a certain size, that seems kind of a open.
You can't keep track of it either. Somebody
Yeah.
could go and they could cut, say, 3 trees, and then time passes, say 6 months passes, and nobody realizes they cut those trees, and then they cut 5 more. So within that year time frame, you've gone about 8 trees cut down rather than 5. We don't have any way to record it.
And that has happened.
Right, well, it seems like some permitting, whether it's, well, to me, having so many per year, seems like they need to be permitted. I mean, I think we define the size. You know, say, okay, something under 6 inches is considered a weed, you can cut that down, but make something, make it 8 inches, 10 inches, whatever. If we want to be more restrictive than the, whatever it is now, the 14 or 12
plus.
but that's up for discussion. But if it's larger than that, or larger than that, you come for a permit. And the permit might be for 3 trees, if they're, you know, where you're gonna put your outbuilding, cut all 3 down. If it's been looked at and approved, I'm not against that. I think saying, you know, every tree has to have its own permit, but anyway, the point is, do you want us to look at this and rewrite or redefine what we think is appropriate?
You know, in an ordinance, when you're looking at it and you have the recitals, you know, whereas the city of Deerheart holds trees in high regards, whereas we want to maintain, whereas we feel as though there is, you know, the things that are going on that we haven't been able to control, then, you know, go forward with this ordinance. I think that working on what it is that you want to see within your heart prior to working on an ordinance would be better. You know, give us a direction on that. You want to be as restrictive as we are, and then just work on a permitting process. We can work with that. If you want to start being more restrictive, we can work with that and do some investigations of what other cities are doing, and then bring in, you know, our own system. If you want to be less restrictive and allow people to cut down all the trees, which I don't think that's an area that we want to go. And
Yeah, when I volunteered a few moments ago to do the work that Russ and I are going to try to take on, I had hoped, obviously it's the direction of the commission that will direct the work, but I had hoped that it would be broad enough to include some direction on things like this, for, you know, some initial scoping of the work, some initial effort on research, some initial effort on determining what communities of our size do elsewhere, et cetera. So I would hate to see this separated out. I think if Russ and I are going to take on some initial work over the next couple of months that we could bring back to the commission, that this should be part of that work.
Yeah, and
really
just
are
to be
separate,
clear,
but-
for everybody, including those that are in here, those that we're working with, and the one person we have that's extra on, is that this is nothing to do with the beaches and dunes. We're not having that discussion at this point. This is already something that's been established, and maybe, you know, that's a future discussion. This is private property trees is what we're discussing.
Well, could it not include trees in parklands that the city has?
And rights of way.
Sure. I mean, the city would be the only one to cut
And
down
rights of
trees.
way.
In right away, yeah, right away, yeah, park, sure. The city just doesn't go out willy-nilly and cut things in parks, we're the only one that would be allowed to do that. But there is no policy.
I was thinking more about planting, but.
Right,
Yeah.
we should be discussing both sides of this equation.
Right.
Right.
I think John's idea is good.
I'm confused. Are we talking about privately owned property with trees, or are we talking about public?
Well, right now, we're talking about both, I think.
So,
I think
I thought the
There's-
park plan had something about trees in it.
well, see, that's the interesting part of this, and maybe clarify that is Parks Master Plan only covers inside the parks. Right of ways are not considered parks.
Okay, so because the parks, we identified all these different areas as parks, so it wouldn't affect those.
No,
Okay,
And
and right of ways were not included in that.
no policy.
All right, I dig.
so you mentioned that the city owns no trees other than those in the parks. But what about like the ridge path? We're on the ridge path and we have, you know, a lot of trees along that ridge path that aren't on my property, for instance, or anybody else's.
Mhm.
So is that considered parkland? Or right of way?
It's right of way,
It's right of way, but so the city controls that.
yes,
Okay.
without policy.
Without a policy.
Yeah, Chief Bowman stated when the tree that was arching over the ridge path was chopped down or cut, he put out a bulletin saying it was illegal.
An apple tree there on Sixth?
No, it was the one that arched across on, it's up in the area about, past Ninth,
Oh,
between Ninth and Gun Club Road.
oh, it's in that new path.
Yeah, and the new path.
Okay.
It got just
Well,
headed.
somebody cut the apple tree right back between Fifth and Sixth. That was, you know, like you had to always duck under it and then it was.
There's not a lot we're gonna be able to
It
do.
was,
with
it was
people.
down, which was fine by me. I saved my forehead.
Nobody knew that tree, that arch tree was cut down, and it turns out actually it was on private property. The trail is a little bit over on that side of the property there. It's like I did that.
Anyway, we're digressing.
Yeah, but we don't have any policy to be able to control that, but I don't know how we would have stopped it. If it was a nighttime job.
Well, if anyone has anything else to say about tree planting, tree permitting, say it now. And then John and I will take on this task. Okay, and are there any concerns of the commission? Hearing none, then the land use attorney is not involved tonight.
Nothing from him.
And so I guess it's time to adjourn.
I move.
I second.
I'm in favor.
Aye.
Aye.
And I have to say that, Paulina, you were the chair when I first came on. So, and you did a great job, better job than I did tonight, I'll say.
Yeah, you were.
Oh, you did fine.
If you need any insights onto this, feel free to call me.
Okay, all right.
Guys, just to let you know, and I know I've kept you updated on this before, our move from Michigan is on May 31st. We are heading out in a car and driving through the countryside all the way there, and we arrive on June 8th, the day of the next meeting. So I'm going to try to get out to the beach for it, but if I can't, I'll be there for every subsequent meeting.
John, why don't you get it when you get here? Give me, ask the office how to get a hold of me and then we'll get together.
That sounds good. I may reach out to you prior to that, but for sure.
Okay, very good.
Take care, all.
And I am having my next knee done, the
Nice to see you,
Monday
Dawn.
of the week of our next meeting. Oh, dear. So I will probably Zoom. I'll Zoom for sure if I'm still. I might bug out. This time I was done with paint fence by Thursday. So
Don, did you need anything at all?
if I'm
Just
coaching.
gonna get ready.
Yeah, I haven't said anything. I have a head cold. I'm all fogged up, so I decided to stay home.
Gotcha, thank you.
With,
Yeah.
yeah, I thought that was best, but yeah, good meeting. And thank you, Russ and John, for taking this on. I think that's the right move.
Thanks.
Any ideas that you have in regards to this, you can give me a call and. But yeah, I guess with John and Russ.
I do kind of have a vested interest in this, Chad. We've talked about this in the past, but I like Paulina's point, what you said about beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and having
Yeah.
cherry trees are beautiful, but they're not necessarily the answer. I think there's going to be a lot of public input, and we all know people that we can ask questions and communicate with, and maybe we all can do that over the next few months and because I think you're right, it's gonna be a hotter topic than what we maybe think it will be, so.
Well, there'll be a whole range of opinions and.
Tremendous amount of work when the beaches and dunes overlay. A huge amount of time was spent on the trees.
Yeah, I was thinking about that, but in comparison, hopefully that was a lot more broad than this. And we can key in on, you know, it's not about Scotchburn, it's not about the grasses, it's not about the, well, it could be about birds. You know, and all
Sure, it's
that.
all habitat.
But this is about trees, so maybe a little easier, but probably not.
All right, thanks, everybody. Appreciate you all.
Opinion.
I was kind of walking pretty
Sure,
normal
give me
most of the time.
another couple of weeks.
Should I?
Find it. Don't think that.
And so,
I found it by memory, but I know I got the
Yeah,
commissioner and council.
it's still,
stolen.
it's a little swollen and so, you know, they push it. I ice on it. I go right home and put ice on it.
Yeah.
But you know, I'm really impressed with people who do PT, honestly. Little things like, you know, she watches me walk and she said, you're still doing this, you know. It's kind of the little things they know, like this part of my knee is really sensitive. She said, you know, I probably should have, but the way you calm down nerves is by overstimulating them. She said, take a really soft cloth and rub that area.
It's kind of like a puppy.
That is good information I'm gonna use over and over again in my life.
We used to do that to our horses. We would put ligament oil on them and we would rub them for like an hour.
Huh.
I got my ACL replaced. I tore it in soccer, motorcycle riding, football, that sort of thing. But when I got that done, and it was incredibly painful, but not like what you went through. We found a machine that had a wrap, and you filled a cooler full of ice.
Right, actually, I know someone who offered me that.
Yes.
I didn't do it because I just don't have the capacity to create the ice.
Yeah.
And she said to me, well, she just bought a bunch of ice. And I said, well, you know, unfortunately, I don't have much in her freezer. And I've packed it with food, which, but you know, I just have an ice wrap and I have a whole bunch of the things that you put in there. So that part wasn't so bad, but.
The other thing I just made recently, because my daughter was telling me about it, was that whole 3-to-1 mixture of water and isopropyl alcohol.
Huh.
And you freeze it, but it never freezes. It turns into a gel and it's just in a Ziploc bag, and I don't know.
Huh,
Because
you
it
can wrap
taps
it around.
it went around rather than the ice bumping around it.
You know, the ice wrap I bought had a place for back here too. A lot of them were only on top, and I thought, ooh, I'm getting that. That would feel good.
Yeah, because right there, yeah, oh my goodness.
You know, I had my ACL tear before there was a reconstruction process. And the athletic surgeon at the university, I was living in Madison at the time.
Wisconsin?
Yeah,
Wisconsin?
he created a process that is now adapted to what is standard. And my roommate at the time, her boyfriend's brother was a football player and had an ACL repair done by this doc. So I went to see him. So this was done, and they took a piece of the tendon here and wrapped it there to give my knee stability. And now that I hear they use the cadaver tendon.
That's what I got.
And I have 2 big scars because they do it arthroscopically now, but
Yeah.
I was,
I just have
I
2 little
wore a
marks.
cast from here to here, and it was attached with a hinge, so I had a little range of motion, which they increased throughout the period of time I wore them. So it was all kind of experimental, but up until last December, it has held.